Your wife is a traitor. Leave immediately. Nina Whitmore delivered the warning in a whisper as she pretended to stumble, her shoulder lightly brushing Adrian Volkov's chest while balancing a tray of crystal glasses. The movement appeared accidental, insignificant, the kind of mistake no one remembered 5 seconds later. Adrian's hand rose instinctively, steadying her arm before the glasses could fall. His reflexes were precise, controlled, practiced. "I'm sorry, sir," Nina said softly, lowering her gaze. She began to step back. "Wait," Adrian murmured under his breath. The word sounded gentle, but it carried authority strong enough to stop her immediately. "You're accusing my wife," he said quietly, not looking directly at her. "In the middle of my home." "I wouldn't say it if I wasn't sure," Nina replied. "What exactly did you hear?" "She was speaking on the phone," Nina said carefully. "She mentioned timing, a power interruption, and something prepared for your drink." Adrian's expression did not change, but his grip on the stem of his glass tightened slightly. "You could have misunderstood. She said the lights would go out for 30 seconds, Nina continued quietly. "She said the symptoms would not appear immediately." "You understand what happens to people who make accusations like this?" Adrian asked. "Yes." "And yet you decided to speak." "Yes." "Why?" Nina hesitated only briefly. "Because silence can kill someone." Adrian studied her for a moment. "Return to work," he said calmly. Nina nodded once and stepped away, disappearing again into the quiet rhythm of service. Dinner continued normally. The guests discussed familiar subjects, property values, retirement planning, grandchildren choosing universities far from home, the difficulty of finding trustworthy people in modern business. Victoria Volkov listened attentively, occasionally touching Adrian's sleeve as she spoke, her gestures warm and reassuring. No one looking at her would imagine betrayal, but Adrian could no longer hear the conversation clearly. "Your wife is a traitor. Leave immediately." At exactly 9 p.m., Victoria rose gracefully. "Adrian always offers a toast before dessert," she said with a gentle smile. The guests nodded approvingly. Adrian stood slowly. Victoria stepped closer to her husband, her expression soft, affectionate. She adjusted his tie with delicate care, her fingers brushing lightly against his chest. "You work too hard," she said quietly. "You carry everything alone." Her tone sounded sincere. She reached for a fresh glass of red wine from Nina's tray. "For you," she said gently. Victoria personally handed him the glass. Her eyes searched his face. Adrian accepted the glass calmly. He did not drink. Instead, he studied her expression. Victoria's smile remained steady, but something behind her eyes felt too focused, too watchful. "Drink," she said softly, almost playfully. "At least tonight. Do this for me." Her voice sounded affectionate, but there was urgency beneath the warmth. If this moment gave you chills, imagine discovering the person you trust most may be hiding the greatest betrayal. What would you do if silence could cost a life? Tell me in the comments. Would you drink the wine, or would you walk away? If you are watching this video and you enjoy powerful stories about justice, loyalty, and hidden truths, please like the video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next story that might change the way you see the world. Adrian lifted the glass slightly, examining the dark liquid as candlelight passed through it. "You seem very invested in whether I drink this," he said quietly. Victoria let out a small laugh, brushing invisible lint from his sleeve. "You're always suspicious," she teased gently. "It's just wine." Her fingers remained lightly on his wrist. "Come on," she added softly. "For me." Adrian tilted his head slightly, studying her. "Since when do you insist I drink?" he asked calmly. Victoria's smile did not break. "Since when do you refuse something I offer you?" she replied lightly. A reasonable answer, but not a comforting one. Adrian could feel the weight of Nina's warning pressing against his instincts. 30 seconds of darkness. Symptoms delayed. Drink prepared. Victoria moved slightly closer, lowering her voice. "You've been distant all evening," she said gently. "Is something wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," he said evenly. "Then drink," Victoria whispered with a soft smile. Her insistence was subtle but undeniable now. A quiet urgency beneath the affection, enough to confirm suspicion. Adrian's eyes moved briefly toward Marcus. A small movement of 2 fingers along the base of the glass. Marcus noticed immediately. Victoria watched Adrian expectantly. The room remained filled with polite conversation. No one sensed danger. No one noticed tension tightening quietly between husband and wife. Adrian lowered the glass slightly. "I will," he said calmly. But he did not drink. Instead, he asked softly, "Tell me something, Victoria. Why does tonight feel so important to you?" Victoria's fingers paused almost imperceptibly, only for a fraction of a second. Then her smile returned. "Because I love you," she said. Adrian nodded slowly. The lights did not go out again. That, more than anything, unsettled Adrian Volkov. Whoever had planned the interruption had already proven the system could be manipulated. A single flicker was enough to confirm preparation. A second interruption was unnecessary. Intelligent enemies did not repeat signals once they knew they had been noticed. Adrian placed the untouched wineglass back onto the table beside his plate. The motion was natural, unhurried. The kind of gesture no one would question during conversation. Around him, the guests continued speaking about travel plans and grandchildren's achievements, the soft hum of voices maintaining the illusion of normalcy. Victoria watched the glass for a fraction of a second before smoothly redirecting her attention to the retired judge seated across from her. Marcus Kane moved slightly closer to the dining room entrance, adjusting the position of his jacket cuff as if simply making himself comfortable. The gesture concealed a quiet touch to the communication device hidden beneath the fabric. Adrian remained standing, offering a short, polite toast about gratitude and partnership. His voice sounded steady, controlled, practiced. Years of discipline allowed him to speak convincingly even while his mind evaluated every detail unfolding around him. "To loyalty," he said calmly, letting the word rest briefly in the air. Victoria lifted her glass immediately. "To loyalty," she echoed warmly. Crystal chimed. Adrian barely allowed the rim of the glass to touch his lips before lowering it again. Dinner resumed its rhythm. Dessert was served a simple vanilla custard with fresh berries, chosen deliberately for its familiarity. Guests relaxed further, unaware that the atmosphere had quietly shifted. Adrian excused himself with polite ease. "Please continue without me," he said, offering an apologetic smile. "Marcus needs a quick word about a shipping matter." Business always provided a believable exit. No one questioned it. Victoria's eyes followed him as he left the table. Her expression remained composed, but her fingers pressed lightly against the edge of her napkin, a small tension most would not notice. Marcus followed Adrian into the adjacent hallway, closing the study door behind them. The shift in atmosphere was immediate. Silence replaced politeness. "What did she say?" Marcus asked quietly. Adrian did not answer immediately. He moved toward the desk, his hand resting briefly against the polished wood surface that had once belonged to the original owner of the estate. "A staff member approached me," Adrian said finally. Marcus's expression did not change, but his attention sharpened. "Which one?" "The new one, Nina." Marcus nodded slightly. "I noticed her watching the room. She claims Victoria arranged a power interruption," Adrian continued. "And that something was prepared for my drink." Marcus did not react with surprise. "Only calculation. The flicker was real," Marcus said. "Backup generator engaged faster than expected. I assumed it was a routine electrical anomaly, but now I'm not so sure." "Check the kitchen disposal," Adrian said quietly. "If there was a prepared glass, someone may have attempted to discard it." Marcus moved immediately, speaking into his cuff microphone as he exited the study. Adrian remained alone for less than 30 seconds. Victoria entered without knocking. Concern appeared naturally in her expression. "You left so suddenly," she said gently. "Is everything all right?" Adrian turned toward her slowly. "I wanted to confirm tomorrow's shipping schedule," he replied calmly. "You never discuss work during dinner," she observed softly. "Tonight is unusual." Victoria stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You seem distracted." Adrian studied her face carefully. For years, he had trusted this woman with information others would never access. She knew schedules, financial structures, partnerships, vulnerabilities. Marriage created access. Access created exposure. "I'm thinking," Adrian said evenly. "About business? About timing." Victoria's eyes held his. "What does that mean?" Adrian allowed a small pause before answering. "It means someone adjusted the security rotation tonight." Victoria tilted her head slightly. "That sounds like Marcus's responsibility." "Marcus claims he did not authorize the change." Victoria folded her arms loosely. "Then someone made a mistake." "Possibly." Silence lingered between them. "Adrian," Victoria said softly, stepping closer, "you've built everything through control. You don't need to question everything tonight." Her tone sounded soothing. Encouraging, almost persuasive. Control requires verification, Adrian replied calmly. Victoria smiled faintly. You always say that. Marcus returned moments later, closing the study door behind him. His expression remained professional, but the tension in his posture revealed urgency. There was a glass in the disposal, Marcus said. Traces of residue. I've secured it. Victoria turned toward Marcus with polite curiosity. Is something wrong? Routine precaution, Marcus answered evenly. Victoria's gaze returned to Adrian. You're making the staff nervous, she said gently. Only the staff? Adrian asked quietly. Victoria held his gaze. For tonight, can you let the business wait? She said softly. Your guests came because they value you, not your shipping routes. Her words sounded reasonable, supportive, yet something inside Adrian resisted the comfort she offered. Of course, he said calmly. Victoria's hand rested lightly against his chest. Good, she whispered. Her touch lingered half a second longer than necessary. Then she left the study. Marcus waited until her footsteps faded. You believe the maid? Marcus asked. I believe patterns, Adrian replied. Marcus nodded. Kitchen staff confirmed one temporary replacement tonight, hired through a third-party agency. Locate him. Already in progress. Adrian moved toward the window overlooking the dark garden. Soft exterior lights illuminated trimmed hedges and stone pathways designed for privacy. Privacy created opportunity. Run a quiet audit on security logs from the past 12 months, Adrian said. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. You think this started earlier? I think careful people do not improvise murder during dinner. Marcus allowed himself a small, humorless breath. I'll review access records, financial links, communication patterns. Adrian nodded. And Nina? Marcus considered briefly. She spoke knowing the risk. Yes, which suggests either honesty or manipulation. Both are dangerous, Adrian replied. Footsteps approached the study door again. Victoria's voice called gently from the hallway. Everyone is asking where you are. Adrian turned toward Marcus. For now, we continue as if nothing is wrong. Marcus nodded. The performance would continue, because whoever had prepared the trap was still waiting for the moment it closed. Adrian returned to the dining room with the same calm presence he had shown all evening. Victoria welcomed him back with a warm smile that revealed nothing. Dessert plates were nearly empty. Conversation remained pleasant, predictable, safe. Yet now Adrian saw the room differently. Every gesture carried potential meaning. Every silence suggested possibility. Across the room, Nina continued clearing dishes quietly, her movements steady despite the tension surrounding her. She did not look toward Adrian. She did not need to. He already knew the truth had entered the room the moment she chose to speak. And now the question was no longer whether betrayal existed. The question was how far it reached. By the time the last guest finished dessert, the atmosphere in the Volkov dining room had subtly shifted. No one could explain why. Nothing obvious had happened, yet conversation slowed. Laughter sounded slightly forced. Even the clinking of silverware seemed more cautious, as if the room itself sensed tension hidden beneath polished manners. Adrian remained composed, thanking each guest personally as they prepared to leave. He shook hands firmly, asked about spouses and grandchildren, and repeated polite invitations to meet again soon. His voice carried warmth, but his attention remained divided, tracking every movement across the room. Victoria stood beside him, the image of grace and loyalty. You must come again before summer, she told the retired judge's wife with a gentle smile. Adrian works too much. He needs reminders that life exists outside contracts. The older woman laughed warmly. My husband is the same way. Men like them never really retire. Victoria nodded sympathetically. It's why they need us. The statement sounded affectionate, supportive, traditional, exactly what the guests expected from a devoted wife. One by one, the cars departed down the long private driveway. The sound of engines faded into the quiet of the surrounding trees. Inside the house, staff cleared dishes efficiently, restoring order as if nothing unusual had taken place. Nina worked silently beside the other employees, her focus fixed on the simple routine of collecting plates, folding linen napkins, avoiding unnecessary attention. She could feel the weight of uncertainty pressing quietly against her thoughts. Speaking had changed something. There was no returning to invisibility now. Marcus approached her near the service entrance. Walk with me, he said calmly. It was not a request. Nina followed him through a corridor leading toward the kitchen offices. The space smelled faintly of coffee and polished metal, familiar and ordinary, a contrast to the tension tightening inside her chest. "You understand the position you've placed yourself in," Marcus said. "Yes. You are either very brave or very foolish." "I didn't feel brave." Marcus studied her briefly. "What exactly did you hear?" Nina repeated the conversation carefully, recalling each phrase as accurately as possible. She described Victoria's tone, the references to timing, the mention of delayed symptoms, the confidence behind every word. Marcus listened without interruption. When she finished, he nodded once. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. Relief flickered briefly across Nina's expression. "But doing the right thing often creates new problems," Marcus added. "I understand." "From this moment forward," Marcus continued, "you do not speak to any other staff about what you heard. You do not change your routine. You do not show fear." "I won't." Marcus paused. "If someone is planning something against Adrian, they may already suspect information has been compromised. You think they'll come after me?" "I think careful people remove variables." The words were calm, but their meaning was clear. Nina nodded. "I won't draw attention." Marcus studied her for another moment. "You've been here only 3 months," he said. "Why take this risk?" Nina hesitated. "My father trusted the wrong people," she said quietly. "No one warned him." Marcus's expression softened slightly. "Loyalty," he said thoughtfully, "is often tested when silence feels safer." Adrian entered the kitchen moments later. He dismissed the remaining staff with a brief nod, leaving only Marcus and Nina in the quiet space. Adrian leaned lightly against the counter, studying Nina more directly now than he had earlier. "You could have ignored what you heard," he said calmly. "Yes. Most people would have." "Yes. Why didn't you?" Nina chose her words carefully. "Because pretending not to see danger doesn't make it disappear." Adrian considered this. "You realize accusing my wife carries consequences." "I didn't accuse her publicly." "No," Adrian agreed. "You chose privacy." "I didn't want attention." "That makes your warning more credible." Silence followed. Adrian moved slowly toward the espresso machine, pressing a button without looking away from Nina. "Marcus," he said quietly, "have the security logs from tonight isolated." "Already done." "And the temporary guard?" "Located. He left the property 10 minutes after the flicker." "Find out who hired him." Marcus nodded. Adrian turned back toward Nina. "From now on," he said calmly, "you report directly to Marcus if anything unusual occurs. No one else." Nina nodded once. "Understood." Adrian studied her expression carefully. "You are aware this situation may not resolve quickly." "I assume that. You may be asked questions." "I'll answer honestly. That would be wise." Adrian lifted the small cup of espresso, letting the bitterness settle before speaking again. "Do you trust your instincts?" he asked. "Yes. Instincts are often shaped by experience." Nina did not respond. "What happened to your father?" Adrian asked quietly. "He trusted someone he shouldn't have." "And no one warned him?" "No." Adrian nodded slowly. "Then tonight you changed the outcome for someone else." The statement did not sound like praise. It sounded like recognition. Marcus checked his phone briefly. "Initial review confirms a scheduled system test was moved from next month to tonight," he said. "Who authorized the change?" Adrian asked. Marcus's expression tightened slightly. "The request came from an internal account." "Victoria's?" Marcus hesitated. "The authorization code matches her clearance level." Nina felt the air in the room grow heavier. Adrian did not react immediately. "Continue the audit," he said calmly. Marcus nodded and left the room. Adrian remained silent for several seconds. "Truth," he said finally, "rarely arrives conveniently." Nina waited. "You may return to your duties," Adrian added. Nina nodded and turned toward the hallway. "Miss Whitmore," Adrian said before she reached the door. She paused. "You've made tonight more complicated," he said. "I didn't intend to cause trouble. Trouble already existed." He studied her carefully. "You simply made it visible." Nina inclined her head slightly and left the kitchen. Upstairs, Victoria stood alone near the large window, overlooking the dark garden. Her reflection in the glass appeared calm, perfect, untroubled, yet her fingers rested tightly against the edge of the window frame. As Nina passed the hallway, Victoria turned slightly, offering a warm smile that revealed nothing. "Thank you for your work tonight," she said kindly. "You're welcome, ma'am," Nina replied politely. Victoria's eyes lingered half a second longer than necessary, long enough to suggest awareness, long enough to confirm danger remained very close. As Nina continued down the hallway, she understood something clearly now. Speaking had not ended the threat. It had only begun the investigation. And in houses built on power, truth often moved more quietly than betrayal. The house did not sleep easily that night. After the guests left, the Volkov estate returned to its usual silence, but the silence felt different now. It was no longer peaceful. It felt observant. Every hallway seemed to listen. Every shadow seemed to wait. Nina finished folding the last linen napkin in the service pantry, her hands moving automatically through the familiar routine. Habit created stability. Stability helped hide fear. She had learned that years ago. Routine allowed the mind to think without appearing distracted. Footsteps approached. Marcus stood at the doorway, posture straight, voice low. "Adrian wants a word with you." Nina followed him upstairs, her heartbeat steady but heavier than usual. The hallway leading to Adrian's private office was lined with framed photographs, awards, business recognitions, charity events, images of Adrian shaking hands with public figures whose names appeared regularly in national news. Power displayed quietly, influence documented without explanation. Marcus knocked once before opening the office door. Adrian stood near the large desk, sleeves slightly rolled, jacket removed. The formal host had disappeared. In his place stood a man accustomed to difficult decisions. He gestured toward the chair across from him. "Sit." Nina obeyed. Marcus remained near the door, silent. Adrian placed a small tablet on the desk and turned the screen toward her. Security footage, time-stamped earlier that evening. "This is the hallway outside the study," Adrian said. The footage showed Victoria passing through the corridor at 6:42 p.m. 2 minutes later, a man in security uniform entered the same hallway. He did not appear on the staff list. Nina recognized the time. "That was shortly after I heard her," she said quietly. Adrian nodded. "We confirmed the uniform does not belong to our internal team." Marcus stepped forward slightly. The badge was copied using a temporary access code, which means someone with authorization approved the access, Adrian said. Silence settled briefly. "Victoria has clearance," Marcus added carefully. Adrian's expression remained controlled. "Continue," he said. Marcus tapped the tablet screen. Another clip appeared. The same unknown guard entering the service corridor near the electrical panel. Timestamp, 8:58 del pomeriggio. Seconds before the flicker. "The outage was intentional," Marcus said. Nina felt a chill run through her. "Someone tested the response time," she said. Adrian studied her carefully. "You understand systems?" "I understand patterns," Nina replied. Adrian leaned slightly against the desk. "Explain what you see." Nina focused on the footage again. "The interruption was short," she said slowly. "That suggests the goal wasn't darkness. It was confirmation." Marcus nodded slightly. "Confirmation of what?" "That the system could be controlled at the exact moment required." Adrian remained silent. Nina continued. "If someone plans to poison you, they want distraction. 30 seconds is enough for confusion, enough for glasses to be switched." Marcus crossed his arms. "That matches the timing you described." Nina hesitated. She sounded confident. She added quietly, "Not nervous, not rushed." Adrian watched her closely. "People sound calm when they believe they've already won," he said. Marcus placed another file on the desk. Financial records. Encrypted transfers. Dates highlighted. "These payments were routed through 3 charities over the past year," Marcus explained. Nina scanned the page. "The amounts increase gradually," she observed. Marcus nodded. "Donations rarely follow upward patterns without reason." Adrian spoke calmly. "Look at the final transfer." Nina traced the numbers. The recipient company was registered offshore. Logistics Consulting. Shell structure. She looked up. "This connects to your shipping routes," she said. Adrian nodded once. "Which means the motive may not be emotional." "Business," Nina said quietly. Marcus added, "Or leverage." Adrian remained still for several seconds. "If someone wanted access to my shipping network," he said, "removing me would create opportunity." Nina considered the implications. Victoria would inherit controlling interest. "Yes, and she would have full authority to restructure leadership." Marcus spoke quietly. "We're still verifying communications." Adrian turned toward Nina again. "When you heard her voice, did she sound afraid?" "No." "Angry?" "No." What then? Certain, Nina answered. Adrian exhaled slowly. Certainty requires preparation. Marcus's phone vibrated softly. He checked the screen briefly. Temporary guard located, he said. Where? Rental apartment, under false identity. Bring him in, Adrian said calmly. Marcus nodded and exited the room. Nina shifted slightly in her seat. You believe this involves more than one person, she said. Yes, Adrian replied, because careful plans require support. Nina hesitated. You asked earlier why I spoke, she said quietly. Yes, my father once believed loyalty protected him, she continued. Adrian listened. He ignored small signs because he didn't want to believe betrayal was possible. And you saw those signs tonight? Yes. Adrian nodded slowly. Experience often teaches faster than comfort. Silence followed. Adrian walked toward the window overlooking the dark garden. Trust is expensive, he said quietly. Once broken, it rarely returns at the same value. Nina did not respond. You may return to your room, Adrian said finally. My room? For now, it is safer if you remain on the property. Nina understood. Leaving would make her vulnerable. And my work? You are still staff, Adrian replied calmly. But now you also observe. Nina nodded. Marcus returned 20 minutes later. He's here, Marcus said. Adrian did not ask questions immediately. Keep this quiet, he instructed. No internal alerts. Marcus understood. The investigation would remain contained. Trust had already proven fragile. Nina rose from the chair. Before she reached the door, Adrian spoke again. Miss Whitmore. She paused. You chose to speak despite risk, he said. Yes. That suggests character. Nina gave a small nod. Character is often tested unexpectedly, Adrian added. She left the office quietly. Down the hallway, the house lights had dimmed automatically. Night mode. Security systems activated. Routine continued. But now every movement inside the estate carried meaning, because someone inside these walls had already decided loyalty was negotiable. And once betrayal enters a home, it rarely leaves quietly. Marcus did not raise his voice during the interrogation. He did not need to. The temporary guard sat in the chair across from him, wrists resting on the polished metal surface of the small security office table. The man was in his early 30s. Posture tense but not defiant. He understood the situation. Men in his position always did. Adrian remained standing near the far wall, silent, observing. Nina stood beside Marcus, slightly behind his shoulder. Her presence quiet but intentional. Adrian had not asked her to leave. The message was clear. Her instincts were now part of the process. What is your name? Marcus asked calmly. Daniel Perez, the man answered. Your real name? A pause. Eric Nolan. Marcus nodded once, confirming information already verified. You were hired through a contracted staffing service, Marcus continued. The agency has no record of your identification. Eric shifted slightly in the chair. I was told the paperwork would be handled. By whom? Silence. Marcus placed a printed photo on the table. Victoria walking through the corridor earlier that evening. Eric glanced at the image but did not speak. Your badge access was authorized through internal credentials, Marcus said evenly. That means someone inside this house approved your presence. Eric swallowed slowly. I just followed instructions. From who? I don't know his real name. Marcus leaned forward slightly. You don't enter a secured estate using falsified credentials without understanding the risk. Eric hesitated. The instructions came through encrypted messages, he admitted. Adrian spoke for the first time. Payment? Half up front. Eric answered quietly. Half after confirmation. Confirmation of what? Adrian asked. That the system could be interrupted. Marcus folded his hands calmly. You were testing the electrical response. Eric nodded. I didn't know anything about poison, he added quickly. Marcus glanced briefly toward Nina. Nina studied the man carefully. His fear appeared genuine. Fear behaved differently from deception. What exactly were you told to do? Nina asked. Eric hesitated at the sound of her voice. Cut the feed for 30 seconds, he said, then restore it immediately. And report the delay time? Nina asked. Yes. To who? A number I never saw before. Marcus placed another sheet on the table. Call routing records, masked connections, temporary devices, disposable network, Marcus said quietly. Adrian's expression remained controlled. This was preparation, he said. Eric nodded quickly. I didn't know anything else. I swear. Who provided the access code? Marcus asked. Eric looked uncertain. It was already active when I arrived. Adrian's voice remained calm, meaning someone inside the system created the opening. Eric lowered his gaze. I just followed the instructions. Marcus studied him for several seconds. You understand what happens if we discover you're withholding information. I'm not, Eric insisted. Nina stepped closer. You were paid well for 30 seconds of work, she said quietly. That means whoever hired you expects a larger outcome. Eric did not respond. Was tonight the first assignment? She asked. No. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. What was the first? Camera calibration, Eric admitted, 2 months ago. Which camera? Service hallway. Marcus exchanged a brief glance with Adrian. That corridor leads directly to the study, Marcus said. Nina understood immediately. Testing visibility. Testing angles. Testing timing. A pattern forming slowly over months. How were you contacted originally? Marcus asked. Encrypted job board, Eric replied. Private security contractors use them. Marcus made a note. Adrian stepped closer now. Did you ever meet the person who hired you? He asked. No. Voice? Filtered. Adrian studied him carefully. Then why take the job? Eric gave a small, uneasy breath. The pay was high. Honesty often arrived when fear outweighed loyalty. Marcus stood. You will remain here until further notice. Eric nodded quickly. Marcus escorted him out of the room, leaving Adrian and Nina alone again. Adrian remained silent for a moment. Preparation over months, he said quietly. Careful, patient. Nina considered the information. Someone studied your routines, she said. Yes. Someone with access. Adrian nodded slightly. Nina hesitated before speaking again. The conversation I heard. She sounded confident the plan would succeed. Confidence suggests control, Adrian replied. And control requires proximity. Silence lingered briefly. Adrian looked toward the security screen mounted on the wall. Victoria appeared in the upstairs hallway camera, speaking calmly with one of the house staff. Her posture remained relaxed, untroubled, unaware she was being studied, or pretending not to be aware. Marcus returned moments later. Background checks on all recent contractors underway, he said. Good. Marcus looked toward Nina. You noticed the pattern quickly. I noticed the patience, Nina said quietly. Marcus nodded. Patient enemies are difficult to expose. Adrian turned toward the desk. Begin reviewing communication logs between Victoria's office and external financial consultants. Marcus paused only briefly. Understood. Nina felt the gravity of the moment deepen. The investigation was no longer theoretical. It had direction now. Structure. Adrian looked toward her. You may ask questions, he said calmly. Nina considered carefully. Why tonight? Marcus answered. Public setting. Witnesses. Confusion reduces suspicion. Adrian added. A death during dinner appears natural under stress. Nina absorbed the logic. Less investigation, she said quietly. Marcus nodded. Exactly. Adrian's voice remained even. People often accept simple explanations when they prefer not to look deeper. Nina understood. Comfort protects lies. Truth disrupts comfort. Marcus checked another update on his phone. Financial tracing suggests at least 3 shell companies connected to the same holding group. Adrian remained still. Find the ownership structure. Marcus nodded. Already in progress. Nina hesitated before speaking again. If the plan required months of preparation, tonight may not be the final attempt. Adrian's eyes shifted toward her. No, he agreed calmly. It will not be, Marcus added quietly. People who invest this much time rarely abandon their objective. Adrian nodded once, which means the danger continues. Nina understood her situation more clearly now. Speaking had made her part of the equation, and equations involving power rarely allowed neutral variables. You should rest, Adrian said finally. There will be more questions tomorrow. Nina nodded. Good night, sir. As she left the room, the weight of responsibility followed her into the quiet hallway. Downstairs, the house lights dimmed further. Security systems adjusted automatically. Routine remained intact, but routine no longer meant safety. Inside the Volkov estate, every conversation now carried potential meaning. Every gesture could be strategy, because someone inside the circle of trust had already decided loyalty was negotiable. And once loyalty becomes negotiable, Everything becomes possible. Morning arrived quietly over the Volkov estate, but the calm light of early day did little to ease the tension that had settled into the walls overnight. Nina woke earlier than usual. Habit formed during uncertain periods of life rarely disappeared. Her small guest room overlooked the east garden, where pale sunlight touched the frost along the hedges. The estate appeared peaceful, orderly, untouched by suspicion. But Nina understood something now. Danger rarely announced itself loudly. It settled slowly, invisibly. Inside routines that appeared safe, she dressed carefully, choosing neutral clothing provided by the house staff coordinator. The gesture itself revealed something important. Adrian intended to keep her close, at least temporarily. Close meant protected. Close also meant involved. Downstairs, the kitchen already carried the scent of coffee and toasted bread. Morning staff moved quietly, respectful of the unspoken awareness that something had shifted during the previous evening. Marcus stood near the central island reviewing messages on his phone. "You're early," he said without looking up. "I couldn't sleep," Nina replied. Marcus nodded slightly. "Neither did most of us." He handed her a small cup of black coffee. "No sugar?" "No, thank you." Marcus studied her briefly. People who choose to speak the truth rarely sleep well the first night. "I didn't expect to," Nina said. Adrian entered the kitchen moments later, already dressed for the day. Dark trousers, pressed shirt, no tie. His expression remained composed, but his eyes revealed he had also slept very little. Marcus handed him a tablet. "Preliminary results," Marcus said. Adrian reviewed the screen silently. Nina remained quiet, but Marcus turned the tablet slightly so she could see. Encrypted communications linked to a consulting firm in Manhattan. Transactions routed through 2 charities. The same shell company identified the previous night appeared repeatedly. "Repeated structure," Nina said quietly. Adrian glanced toward her. "Yes," Marcus added. "The consulting firm officially specializes in logistics optimization." Nina read the company description carefully. "They're positioned to access shipment data." Adrian nodded. "Which gives them strategic advantage." Marcus tapped another section. One board member connected indirectly to Victoria's charity foundation. Nina felt the pattern tightening. "She didn't act alone," she said. "No," Adrian agreed calmly. Marcus leaned against the counter. "Financial influence, system testing, controlled timing. A coordinated effort," Nina concluded. Adrian's gaze remained thoughtful. Motivation still unclear. "Money?" Marcus suggested. "Money alone rarely requires this level of patience," Adrian replied. Nina considered carefully. "Control," she said quietly. Adrian nodded once. Yes. Control over logistics meant control over distribution. Control over distribution meant leverage. Leverage created power. Marcus checked another message. The temporary contractor's phone contained deleted routing instructions. "Recovered?" Adrian asked. "In progress." Nina hesitated. "The poison," she said softly. Marcus looked toward her. "No confirmation yet," he replied, "but the preparation suggests it exists." Adrian set the tablet down. "Marcus, isolate Victoria's communication access beginning 6 months ago." Marcus nodded. "No alerts triggered." Adrian turned toward Nina. "You will continue normal duties today." Nina understood the reasoning. If Victoria suspected exposure, sudden changes would confirm it. Normal behavior created time. Time created opportunity. "What should I observe?" Nina asked. "Routine," Adrian said. "People reveal intention through routine." Marcus added, "Notice anything unusual?" Nina nodded. Breakfast proceeded quietly. Simple food, scrambled eggs, toast, coffee, ordinary details grounding an increasingly complex situation. As Nina cleared dishes, she noticed Victoria enter the kitchen. Victoria wore a soft cream sweater, her expression calm, composed, perfectly appropriate for a quiet morning after hosting guests. "Good morning," Victoria said warmly. "Good morning, ma'am," Nina replied politely. Victoria smiled gently. "You handled last night well," she said. "Thank you." Victoria stepped closer to the coffee machine. "These events can be stressful for new staff." "I'm learning." Victoria studied her briefly. "You seem very observant." The statement sounded casual, but the words carried weight. "I try to do my job well," Nina answered carefully. Victoria poured coffee slowly. People who observe carefully often see more than they should, she said lightly. Nina remained neutral. I focus on details relevant to my work. Victoria smiled faintly. Of course. Her tone remained pleasant, but her eyes measured Nina more carefully now. Adrian entered the kitchen at that moment. Victoria's expression softened immediately. You left early last night, she said gently. Work required attention. You worry too much, she replied affectionately. Worry preserves stability, Adrian answered calmly. Victoria laughed softly. You always say that. She stepped closer to him. We should spend the afternoon together, she suggested. Fresh air might help you relax. Adrian considered briefly. I have meetings. Victoria touched his arm lightly. Just an hour. Her voice remained warm, encouraging. Gentle pressure again. Nina noticed. Marcus noticed. Adrian noticed. We'll see, Adrian said calmly. Victoria nodded, accepting the answer without resistance. She turned toward Nina again. Please ensure the blue office is prepared today, she said. I expect a delivery. Yes, ma'am. Victoria left the kitchen. Marcus spoke quietly once she was gone. She scheduled no deliveries this morning. Adrian's expression remained neutral. Check incoming packages carefully. Marcus nodded. Nina absorbed the information. Routine instructions now carried hidden meaning. Every request required evaluation. Every change suggested possibility. Marcus's phone vibrated again. The consulting firm has connections to a private investment group based in Zurich, he said. Adrian's gaze sharpened slightly. International expansion requires capital. Marcus nodded. Or partnership. Nina considered the implication. If Victoria provides internal access, she said slowly, the company gains operational advantage. And I lose leverage, Adrian added. Marcus crossed his arms. Motivation confirmed. Control. Strategic positioning. Long-term planning. Adrian turned toward Nina. You see why patience matters? Yes. People rarely reveal their intentions immediately. Nina nodded. Truth appears slowly. Adrian allowed a faint expression of agreement. Continue observing, he said. Nina left the kitchen quietly. The estate appeared unchanged. Staff moved normally. Security maintained routine posture. Victoria's instructions continued throughout the morning. Everything appeared stable, but now Nina understood something clearly. Stability could be manufactured, calm could be rehearsed, and betrayal often dressed itself as normal life. By midday, the investigation had moved beyond suspicion. Now it required proof, and proof required patience equal to the patience used to construct the betrayal itself. Victoria did not cancel the afternoon meeting. That detail concerned Adrian more than any financial record Marcus had uncovered that morning. People who planned carefully rarely disrupted their own schedules without reason. Continuity created credibility. Credibility created cover. By early afternoon, the Volkov estate had resumed its usual rhythm. Staff moved quietly through hallways polished to reflection. The distant hum of climate control filled empty spaces between footsteps. Outside, winter sunlight cast long, pale shadows across the stone courtyard. Nina stood inside the blue office, preparing the room as instructed. The office was rarely used. Its walls displayed framed maritime maps, subtle reminders of Adrian's earliest business ventures in cargo routing. A large oak desk faced tall windows overlooking the north garden. Everything in the room suggested quiet importance. Victoria had specifically requested this space be ready. That alone made it significant. Nina adjusted the position of two leather chairs opposite the desk, aligning them carefully. Precision mattered now more than ever. Every detail could reveal intention. Footsteps approached. Victoria entered carrying a slim folder, her expression calm but purposeful. You prepared the room quickly, she said pleasantly. Yes, ma'am. Victoria placed the folder on the desk and glanced around briefly. Efficiency is underrated, she said lightly. Nina inclined her head politely. Victoria moved toward the window, her reflection faint in the glass. Tell me, she said without turning, how are you finding the work here so far? It's been good, Nina replied carefully. Victoria turned slightly, studying her. You adapt quickly. I try to be reliable. Victoria smiled faintly. Reliability is rare. The words sounded casual, but Nina sensed evaluation behind them. A soft knock interrupted the moment. Marcus entered the room. Delivery has arrived, he said evenly. Victoria nodded. Have it brought in. Two uniformed couriers entered moments later carrying a secured metal case approximately the size of a briefcase. Their demeanor was professional, neutral, careful not to draw attention to the object's significance. Nina noticed Marcus observing the case more closely than necessary. The couriers placed it on the desk. Victoria signed electronically and dismissed them without hesitation. "Thank you," she said politely. The door closed behind them. Victoria rested her hand lightly on the case. "Confidential documents," she explained casually. Marcus nodded. "Would you like privacy?" "Yes." Marcus turned toward Nina. "You may step outside." Nina moved toward the door, but Victoria spoke again. "Actually, Miss Whitmore may stay." Marcus paused. Adrian entered the room at that exact moment. His timing felt deliberate. "You requested the blue office," Adrian said calmly. Victoria smiled. "I thought it would be quieter." Her tone remained warm, familiar, unthreatening. Adrian stepped closer to the desk. "New documents?" he asked. "Yes," Victoria replied smoothly. "Investment updates." Adrian glanced briefly toward Marcus. Marcus remained still, observing. Victoria opened the metal case. Inside were neatly arranged folders and a slim electronic storage drive. "All routine," she said. Adrian examined the documents without touching them. "International restructuring?" he asked. Victoria nodded. "We discussed expansion last quarter." Adrian looked toward the financial summary page. Marcus observed carefully. Nina stood near the wall, silent but attentive. The document referenced logistics partnerships across European ports. Zurich appeared in the header. Marcus noticed. Adrian noticed Marcus noticing. "Ambitious," Adrian said calmly. Victoria smiled. "You taught me ambition." Her voice sounded sincere, convincing, practiced. Adrian closed the folder slowly. "When were these finalized?" "Recently." Victoria maintained steady eye contact. "Timing matters in investment." Adrian nodded slightly. "Yes, timing always matters." A quiet pause settled between them. Marcus stepped forward slightly. "Would you like me to verify the documents?" he asked politely. Victoria's expression remained composed. "That won't be necessary." Adrian spoke before Marcus could respond. "It will be necessary." His tone remained calm, but the statement carried quiet authority. Victoria's eyes moved briefly between Adrian and Marcus. A calculation passed across her expression. Then she smiled again. "Of course," she said lightly. "You always prefer confirmation." Marcus took the documents. His movements remained professional, measured. Victoria turned toward Adrian. "You seem unusually cautious today," she observed gently. "Caution prevents mistakes," Adrian replied. Victoria studied him carefully. "You've never doubted me before." Adrian's gaze remained steady. "I verify everyone." Victoria tilted her head slightly. "Even your wife?" "Yes." The answer came without hesitation. Silence lingered briefly. Victoria's smile softened, but something colder moved beneath it now. "Marriage requires trust," she said quietly. "Trust requires honesty," Adrian replied. Marcus reviewed the electronic drive using a secure tablet. "Encryption layers appear newly added," he said. Victoria crossed her arms loosely. "Standard update." Marcus did not respond immediately. Adrian stepped closer to the desk. "You scheduled this delivery personally," he said. "Yes." "Why not include it in tomorrow's meeting?" "Opportunity rarely waits," Victoria replied. Adrian studied her face carefully. Victoria met his gaze without flinching. Confidence again. Nina recognized it immediately. The same certainty she had heard in Victoria's voice the previous afternoon. Marcus finished scanning the drive. "There are external authorization links," he said quietly. Victoria remained calm. "International partners require documentation." Adrian placed one hand lightly against the desk. "And why was this not disclosed earlier?" Victoria's expression remained steady. "I intended to discuss it privately." Marcus closed the folder. "We will review everything thoroughly," he said. Victoria nodded once. "I expected nothing less." Her tone remained smooth, controlled. Yet the room now felt tighter, more deliberate. Nina understood the pattern clearly now. Victoria did not react emotionally. She adjusted strategically. Every response measured, every movement calculated. As the meeting ended, Victoria gathered her gloves from the desk. She paused beside Adrian. "You've been distant since last night," she said softly. "I've been observant," Adrian replied. Victoria studied him for a moment. "Observation changes relationships," she said quietly. Truth often does, Adrian answered. Victoria gave a small nod. Then she left the room. Marcus waited until the door closed. These documents confirm intent, he said. Adrian remained still. Yes. Nina spoke carefully. She's accelerating the timeline. Marcus nodded. She believes she still controls the situation. Adrian looked toward the window. Outside, winter light reflected against the frozen surface of the garden fountain. Control created confidence. Confidence created exposure. Prepare the countermeasure, Adrian said quietly. Marcus nodded. Nina understood the meaning immediately. The investigation had moved beyond observation. Now it would move toward confrontation. Because once truth begins to surface, it rarely returns quietly beneath the surface again. Victoria did not retreat after the meeting in the blue office. That alone confirmed Adrian's growing certainty that the situation had moved beyond suspicion. People who sensed danger often delayed decisions. Victoria was doing the opposite. She was accelerating. Late afternoon, shadows stretched across the marble floors as the estate prepared for the evening. Staff followed their routines, unaware that the house had become a quiet battlefield of observation and strategy. Marcus converted the secondary library into a temporary operations room. Screens displayed communication logs, financial flows, and building access records. The evidence had begun forming a pattern strong enough that coincidence could no longer explain it. Nina stood near the long oak table, studying the layout Marcus had assembled. Connections between shell companies traced toward the Zurich investment group identified earlier that morning. One of the firms specialized in port optimization technology. Another managed private shipping insurance contracts. Together, they represented something larger than financial gain. Control of logistics infrastructure meant influence across multiple industries. Adrian reviewed the timeline Marcus had constructed. 18 months of gradual preparation. Access permissions altered quietly. Consultants introduced through legitimate business channels. Temporary contractors used to test vulnerabilities. Long strategy, Marcus said. Yes, Adrian replied. Nina observed the structure carefully. The plan required patience, she said, and confidence that no one would notice small changes, Marcus added. Adrian looked toward Nina. Small changes are often ignored. Nina nodded, because people assume routine equals safety. Marcus received a message on his secured phone. Encrypted channel recovered from Nolan's device, he said. Origin? Adrian asked. Routing through 3 countries. Final signal bounced through Geneva. Zurich again. The pattern tightened. Marcus placed the recovered message transcript on the table. Simple coded confirmations. Timing confirmations. System performance reports. No names. No direct references. Careful communication. Professional communication. Victoria entered the room unexpectedly. Neither Adrian nor Marcus showed surprise. Victoria observed the screens calmly. You're working late, she said. Adrian leaned slightly against the table. Business rarely waits. Victoria nodded. I understand that better than most. Her eyes moved briefly across the displayed data. No visible concern. No visible fear. Only calculation. You're reviewing expansion strategies, she asked casually. Yes, Adrian replied. Victoria smiled faintly. I'm glad to see progress. Marcus remained silent. Victoria's confidence remained intact. That confidence revealed something important. She did not yet realize how much Adrian already knew. Will you join me for dinner? She asked. Later, Adrian replied. Victoria accepted the answer easily. I'll be in the west sitting room. Her tone remained warm, controlled. She left without hesitation. Nina waited until the door closed. She believes she still has time, Nina said quietly. Marcus nodded. Which gives us time. Adrian reviewed the financial overlay Marcus had assembled. Trace the Zurich holding structure, he said. Marcus expanded the display. 3 primary shareholders. 2 anonymous. 1 partially disclosed. Nina studied the partial identity carefully. The surname appears Italian, she said. Marcus zoomed the record. Angelo Group Holdings. Adrian's expression changed slightly. Family connection, Marcus said quietly. Adrian did not respond immediately. Nina sensed the shift. Family betrayal carried different weight. Marcus continued. The Angelo Group has attempted entry into East Coast shipping networks for several years. Denied repeatedly, Adrian said calmly. Marcus nodded. Victoria serves on the advisory board of their philanthropic division. Nina understood immediately. Access disguised as charity. Trust, disguised as goodwill. Adrian rested his hands lightly against the edge of the table. Personal relationships create professional vulnerability, he said. Marcus checked additional correspondence. Victoria met with Angelo representatives 4 times in the past year. Nina considered the implications carefully. She positioned herself as the bridge. Marcus nodded. Strategic proximity. Adrian remained composed, but something colder settled behind his calm expression. Schedule a private dinner tonight, Adrian said quietly. Marcus looked toward him. With Victoria? Yes. Marcus understood immediately. Confrontation required controlled environment. Evidence required confirmation. Nina spoke cautiously. She may already suspect investigation. Adrian nodded, which is why she will accelerate. Marcus added, pressure reveals intention. Adrian looked toward Nina. You will remain nearby. Nina nodded. Understood. Marcus prepared discreet recording equipment. Audio capture disguised within decorative objects. Backup recording routed through independent network. Precautions layered carefully. The west sitting room had been arranged for privacy. Low lighting. Minimal staff presence. Controlled access points. Victoria arrived precisely on time. Her composure remained intact. She wore dark green silk, understated but deliberate. She greeted Adrian warmly. You look tired, she said softly. Long day, Adrian replied. Victoria poured wine personally. 2 glasses. Measured portions. Steady hands. Adrian observed every movement. You've been distant, Victoria said gently. I've been thoughtful. Victoria smiled faintly. You rarely question success. Success invite attention. Victoria handed him the glass. He accepted it, but did not drink. Victoria watched him carefully. You don't trust easily, she said quietly. I trust evidence, Adrian replied. Victoria tilted her head slightly. Evidence of what? Adrian met her gaze calmly. Of intention. Silence settled between them. Victoria placed her glass down slowly. Business has made you suspicious, she said softly. Experience has made me careful. Victoria studied him closely. And what exactly are you being careful about tonight? Adrian allowed the question to rest unanswered for several seconds. Tell me something, he said calmly. Victoria waited. When did you begin working with Angelo Group? Her expression did not change immediately, but Nina, listening through the secured channel, heard the shift in her breathing. Small, controlled, but present. I advise many organizations, Victoria said smoothly. Advising requires disclosure. Not always. Adrian's voice remained even, especially when advisory positions involve conflict of interest. Victoria leaned back slightly. You think I've betrayed you? I think you've been preparing something. Victoria's eyes sharpened subtly. Preparation is not betrayal. Preparation for my removal is. Silence expanded between them. Victoria's expression softened again. You've always respected intelligence, she said quietly. I respect honesty. Victoria looked at the untouched wineglass in Adrian's hand, then back to his eyes. You've discovered something, she said calmly. Yes. Another pause. Victoria gave a small nod. I wondered when you would. Her voice remained steady. No panic, no denial, only quiet acceptance, which confirmed everything, because innocence rarely prepares for exposure, but guilt often rehearses it. Adrian placed the glass on the table without drinking. You underestimated one detail, he said calmly. Victoria's eyes moved slightly. What detail? Someone chose not to stay silent. Victoria understood immediately. Her gaze shifted briefly toward the doorway, toward the unseen presence she now realized existed, toward the variable she had not anticipated, the invisible witness who had changed the equation, and in that moment, Victoria understood the balance of power had shifted, because betrayal succeeds only while it remains hidden, and now, it no longer was. Victoria did not attempt to deny the accusation. That was the final confirmation Adrian needed. In the quiet of the west sitting room, the air seemed heavier, charged with the weight of truths that had waited months to surface. The low amber light from the wall lamps cast long shadows across the polished wood floor, making every movement appear slower, more deliberate. Victoria rested her hands lightly on the edge of the table, her composure almost admirable in its discipline. You always did value loyalty, she said softly. I still do. Adrian replied calmly. Victoria studied his face carefully, as if searching for hesitation. You built everything by anticipating threats. she continued. I assumed you would eventually notice. You underestimated timing, Adrian said evenly. I underestimated interference, she corrected. Her eyes moved briefly toward the door again, toward the unseen presence she now understood had disrupted her design. Nina stood in the adjacent monitoring room beside Marcus, listening through the secured audio channel. Her hands remained steady, but her heartbeat carried the quiet intensity of someone aware that the next minutes would decide everything. Victoria lifted her glass but did not drink. I never intended this to become personal, she said calmly. Adrian gave a faint, almost humorless breath. You married me. Yes, and gained access to every internal structure I built. Victoria did not deny it. You were already powerful, she said. But power expands when it connects. Through betrayal? Through opportunity? Adrian's voice remained controlled. You tested my systems for 18 months. I tested your predictability. And planned my death. Victoria's expression did not break. I planned a transition. Silence settled heavily between them. Nina felt the chill of the words through the speaker. Victoria spoke without anger, without guilt, as if discussing an executive restructuring rather than murder. Your shipping network controls too many leverage points, she continued. Port access, insurance routing, supply chain timing. Governments rely on it. Corporations rely on it. And you intended to transfer control, restructure control. Adrian nodded slowly. Through Angelo Group, Victoria's eyes revealed the smallest flicker of acknowledgement. They understand long-term positioning, she said. They understand patience. Adrian leaned slightly forward. You positioned yourself as internal access. Yes, and expected no resistance. I expected logic. Adrian's gaze remained steady. Logic does not require murder. Victoria tilted her head slightly. Influence rarely changes hands politely. Marcus watched the live transcript appear on the tablet screen. Every word recorded, every admission confirmed. Victoria's voice remained composed. You were never meant to suffer, she said quietly. Your death would appear natural, your legacy intact. My legacy would belong to someone else, Adrian replied. Victoria did not deny it. Legacy belongs to whoever controls the structure. Adrian allowed a brief pause. You rehearsed this conversation. I prepared for multiple outcomes. Adrian's expression hardened slightly. You did not prepare for honesty. Victoria's eyes sharpened. I prepared for survival. Adrian studied her carefully. Survival rarely requires deception at this scale. Victoria leaned slightly forward. You built your empire the same way. No, Adrian said calmly. I built mine transparently. Victoria gave a faint smile. No empire is transparent. Marcus signaled quietly toward the secondary team positioned discreetly outside the sitting room. Everything was ready. Adrian placed both hands lightly on the table. You involved external investors, he said. Yes. You altered internal security. Yes. You introduced unauthorized contractors. Yes. You prepared a poison delivery. Victoria did not respond immediately. Then she spoke calmly. It would not have caused suffering. The admission settled heavily in the silence. Nina felt the final confirmation fall into place. Victoria did not deny the attempt. She justified it, which meant the plan had always been real. Adrian stood slowly. You miscalculated one variable. Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly. The maid. Yes. Victoria gave a small nod. I wondered how long she would remain invisible. Adrian's voice remained steady. Invisibility allows observation. Victoria exhaled quietly. A small detail, she admitted. A decisive detail, Adrian corrected. The door opened quietly. Marcus entered with 2 federal investigators dressed in plain clothes. Victoria did not appear surprised. Her eyes moved calmly from Marcus to Adrian. You involved authorities, she said. I involved evidence, Adrian replied. Victoria stood slowly. Her composure remained intact. You always did prefer certainty, she said. Certainty prevents repetition, Adrian answered. Marcus presented the formal documentation. Victoria accepted the paper calmly. No protest. No dramatic reaction. Only acknowledgement. As she prepared to leave the room, she paused briefly beside Adrian. You built something powerful, she said quietly. And now? Adrian asked. Victoria's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Now someone else will try. She turned and walked toward the investigators without resistance. The door closed behind them. Silence filled the room. Marcus released a controlled breath. 18 months of preparation, he said quietly, and ended by one decision, Adrian replied. Nina remained in the monitoring room, processing the reality of what had just occurred. Speaking had changed everything. Adrian entered the room moments later. For the first time since the investigation began, the tension in his expression had eased slightly. "You did the right thing," he said calmly. Nina nodded. "I didn't know what would happen. Truth rarely guarantees comfort," Adrian said, "but it prevents worse outcomes." Marcus reviewed final confirmations on the tablet. "Zurich connections will be handled through legal channels," he said. Adrian nodded. Quietly, Nina hesitated. "What happens now?" she asked. Adrian considered briefly. "Now the structure stabilizes." He studied her carefully. "You saw something others missed." "I listened." "Most people hear," Adrian said. "Few listen." Morning light would eventually reach the same dining room where the evening had begun. The faint red wine stain remained barely visible on the white linen cloth that had not yet been replaced. A small mark, almost unnoticeable, yet permanent. A reminder that truth often leaves evidence long after deception fades. Nina had been hired to clean the house. Instead, she revealed what had already been broken. And in doing so, she changed the outcome of a story that would otherwise have ended in silence. This story reminds us that betrayal rarely comes from strangers, it often comes from the people we trust the most. True loyalty is not proven through words, but through actions, especially when no one is watching. The quiet courage to speak the truth, even when it is dangerous, can prevent injustice and protect what truly matters. Power may create the illusion of control, but integrity is what preserves it. Sometimes, the most ordinary person becomes the reason justice survives, proving that doing the right thing is never insignificant, even when it feels risky. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.